think the legal industry is going to reconfigure in terms of perhaps a move away from that pyramid structure and more to like barbell at one end of that spectrum. That work is not done by lawyers at all. It's done by technology.
All right, welcome back to the Best Practice Podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Kenzo. Kenzo is a former lawyer at Bird & Bird, former general counsel, and is now the founder of his own platform called Correm, a platform giving lawyers all the infrastructure that they need to go and build their own AI-native fractional legal practice. In the episode, we dive into why lawyers should be choosing a fractional legal career, how to know if it's for you, how AI is changing the whole dynamic between the way lawyers can now work with businesses and what it actually takes to go and build your own legal practice. We also talk about Kenzo's approach to building Correm, why businesses are still valuing having real human behind all that technology, and how lawyers can build a much broader career by working with a whole portfolio of different companies.
If the old heuristic was work really hard and become a partner, AI might change that to work really hard, get as much experience so you could run your own practice.
We also dive into some more practical advice for junior lawyers, including why commercial awareness is becoming so much easier to develop with AI, how you should go about seeking out experience, and why the traditional route is no longer the only route to being a successful lawyer. Kenzo, welcome to the Best Practice Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on. Now, for those that don't know you or what Correm does, what does it let you do?
Yeah, so start with, I'm a lawyer, I've a general counsel, been practicing for over 10 years, started at Bird & Bird and then went in-house and then ended up at GC. And now building Correm. So what Correm does is it allows an individual lawyer access to all of the infrastructure that they need to run a solo AI native practice. And for companies, it gives them access to really high quality lawyers at a price that they can afford and that kind of respects their runway, if you like.
Awesome. So you touched on the fact that it's almost that underlying infrastructure. So it's more than just an AI chatbot. It allows you to do billing, invoicing, anything else the Correm can...
Yeah, so effectively the way we built it, and it's been built by lawyers, is on the infrastructure side, it's everything you need to run your practice. As you touched on, billing, data, invoicing, precedent documents, the AI tooling that you'll need in this day and age. But also we've built tools in there that allow you to kind of really delight your clients and customers. Thought about what makes a really good general counsel to a company. How do they add the maximum amount of value? And with the data that is kind of aggregated on Correm, you can do some really interesting things with that and kind of arm GCs with everything that they need to go to a CFO and say, hey, here's what we've been working on over the last 5 months. Here's why, we need to do X rather than Y, or here's why, we might need to kind of bring in an extra fractional person, or basically using data to really reflect legal ops, which is super valuable for companies and makes the lawyer and the fractional lawyer kind of more valuable to the company and better as a practitioner.
Okay. And how come you thought there was a space in the market for like Correm? You were GC at Modern Milkman before. What made you think, okay, I need to build a platform for fractional lawyers to spin up their own solo AI native practice?
So I moved to the UAE about 3 years ago, and kind of what I did was I turned Modern Milkman into my first fractional client, if you like, just because from a permanent establishment perspective, they don't have an office out in the UAE. So working from the UAE to kind of make that into a proper relationship. I became a consultant, and to be a legitimate one, you need more than one client. So I reached back out to Entrepreneur First, where I worked before, and sort of said, well, do any portfolio companies need fractional support? At this point, I hadn't really done too much fractional work at all, but I obviously had experience building, leading and operating legal teams inside companies.
Yeah.
So quite a few of them came back, and more than I could manage capacity-wise. So brought in some other lawyers who I'd worked with before. And we quickly realized that actually all of the back-end stuff didn't really exist anywhere. We would have had to we were, in fact, all buying different, tools and tech stacks and kind of pulling them all together. So we built a version 1. This was, 2 years ago. That was horrible. but it worked for us, right? So high utility wasn't beautiful at all. I just used
Yeah.
that and operated the practice for about 2.5 years. And then with AI Tailwind, we quickly realized that two things. We could really optimize that platform, and companies really valued working in that way with a point person that managed their legal function, rolled their sleeves up and got in and really owned outcomes, but didn't cost the same as a permanent hire and meant that they could avoid sending all of their work to external counsel or doing it themselves and kind of vibe drafting and taking risks. The other thing
Yeah.
is as well, I think there's kind of like a sense that because AI now exists and it's quite good at legal, that lots of people outside of law will kind of want to do legal work. I disagree with that. I think the reason they do it is because there's kind of like a push for them to do it. Either it's they only have expensive options, so they think, well, I'm just going to do this myself, or they see it as so low level and so low risk that they think, I don't want to bother anyone with this. This is going to take me kind of 5 minutes to do.
Yeah.
But what we think is actually like the optimum solution is, for the majority of your work, is something that's affordable. That means that you can take your time and use that to run your business.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think also people really do value that almost like human verified output. I guess you've got that real GC behind it, being able to verify those outputs for you and turn them into outcomes for the business.
Yeah, I think kind of just from a human perspective, everything is becoming optimized and, AI is touching every vertical, not just legal, but everything.
Yeah.
Actually, kind of a lot of the reason law has sustained is relationships and the fact that people build them. And I don't think that is going anytime soon. That will only go if it's so expensive that it doesn't make any sense to use anything other than kind of pure tech. So I think that's why there'll be an evolution of kind of the way legal services are procured and bought, such that it has to work for clients. Testing it, the market is pulling as well.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. And tell me about what it looks like for, say, a startup, maybe one of the portfolio companies, entrepreneurs first. What does it look like for them when they need to decide that they need some like legal support? So they've got, I don't know, they've got a few options. They can either go and log on to Claude and run some contracts. They can either engage with a law firm, or they've got Correm. How does Correm sit different in the market? Is it all like fixed fee pricing? Do they get to like log on to the platform and like choose a lawyer, or do you like recommend them one through the platform? How does that kind of like matchmaking kind of
Sure.
work?
So Quorum is the system of record for lawyers primarily. So they are using that to kind of record their work and tell the system what it is that they're doing. Now, when a portfolio company comes onto the platform and they need a lawyer, whether it's same day or an ongoing fractional lawyer, they can explain to our AI exactly what it is that they need. What it will do is it will surface a lawyer that has worked on something contemporaneously that matches what they're looking for. So we repurpose that data, obviously sanitized for confidentiality, so we're able to make intelligent matches. So we're not just showing you kind of a list of
Everyone.
lawyers. We're telling
Yeah.
you should go and work with this person for this really specific reason, and book a meeting with them now, and that's your fractional lawyer.
I see. That makes sense. Is a lot of the stuff you said it can be like an almost like same day thing. So I'm thinking it's a bit similar to like, lots of companies have private medical insurance. They need to see a GP, and it's like, okay, you can see one in a few hours. You can see one tomorrow when it fits you. Is that the kind of model kind of thing, and then you can like work with them ongoing?
So I think kind of legal, especially kind of in-house legal, doesn't really come in cookie cut shapes and sizes. Kind of, you need legal when something surfaces inside your business, right? So
Yeah.
I think the way we viewed it is it would be a bit remiss of us to sort of say we only do X or we only do Y, right? With companies from pre-seed to Series D that we kind of, or the lawyers on our platform work with, they have all manner of requests. So sometimes they'll come to the platform and they'll need something kind of today, right? I need let's say they sell SaaS and they've got comments back from the other side on their standard paper. They need somebody to turn it around quickly, right? Or they might have an ongoing project and they need kind of a fractional general counsel. Our lawyers, because they have been general counsels, can handle both. And they shouldn't really be turning down relationship and opportunities because something is kind of too low value. Because the way we see it is really good companies will grow into kind of, good retainers for our lawyers.
Yeah. What do you look for in like a good GC then? To become a fractional GC on the platform, do they have to have been a GC before somewhere else, or could they have been any lawyer as long as they're like kind of qualified?
No, so we're apply only. And since launch, I think we've had about 45 lawyers apply. Our criteria is what we want from GCs is, or the GCs on the platform is, you've either been senior legal counsel or general counsel in, either a venture-backed startup or a high-growth company.
Yeah.
And the reason we position it that way is because often that is kind of one of the most demanding environments you will work in. So I worked in the private equity teams at Travis Smith and the VC team at Bird & Bird, both really, really hard work. But actually, kind of like the hardest I've ever worked is probably Deliveroo, apart from now, obviously, running the company. But everything is novel. What the company is trying to do is probably, challenging in terms of, does the law even exist to support this? What are the rules here?
More risky.
Exactly. So if lawyers have worked in those environments, that's a really good indicator and a really good badge to suggest that they'll be able to handle the clients that are coming through the platform and the cutting edge technology that they're working on and the environments that they're working in.
Okay, yeah. And then I think also, just being able to know the business inside out as well, right? So, which is something a lot of lawyers from the external law firm lens almost don't always see because they're working with so many different companies. But being able to see, how the operations work, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good point. When you work with a portfolio of clients, you get so much broader experience. You might be administering an option scheme to give shares to employees. It will look very different across your 5 different companies. And that's helpful for you and it's helpful for your future clients.
And do you think going and looking forward, lawyers should be more generalized in the world of AI, or do you think they should really hone in on a specific practice area and go all in on that kind of specific area on like Department of Law?
Well, I guess the bet that we're making is that legal teams kind of, actually, taking a step back, not legal teams, but the way companies buy legal services will be concentrated into a small number of individuals, if not one individual. So in that instance, what you need to be is general enough that you can handle kind of a legal function. But actually, if you're an individual specialist and you're, working with a stable of 20 fractional GCs and you're a patent attorney or you're a data protection specialist, you're going to be really busy because not very many independent lawyers have kind of a really strong, vertical specialization that they just do. Most fractional lawyers still use law firms today when work becomes too specialist that they don't have the skills in-house. But actually, if you think about the way we think the market is evolving, if you're a standalone privacy lawyer, you're going to be really busy.
Yeah, definitely. And you were touching on earlier how you see this as like an almost reconfiguration of legal services. Did you want to like kind of talk about that a bit more?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a bit of a reversion as well, because if we look at kind of legal services 100 years ago, you had practice leads, so the equivalent of partners, and then you had clerks, and not too much in between, right? So you didn't have kind of lots of mid-level associates that were billing by the hour and that sort of thing. The reason being, a lot of the work that required the lower effort wasn't actually done by lawyers at all. And I think AI is now moving us a lot closer to that. So I think the legal industry is going to reconfigure in terms of perhaps a move away from that pyramid structure and more to like a barbell structure, if you like. But at one end of that spectrum, that work is not done by lawyers at all. It's done by technology.
Okay, so the barbell could almost be like the AI agents at the bottom, and then not. Are you saying then not many mid-level lawyers, and then lots of rainmakers at the top?
I think kind of it could go that way, yeah. I think it definitely could go that way because if you're leading a practice and you've got the domain expertise to kind of win clients and do the work, and then
Yeah.
you've got processes in place that, you know, allow you to do the work and then apply judgment, then it makes sense naturally that you're not going to need as much of that middle. So I don't think it will be a complete collapse, but I think you might kind of see a few less in that middle space. But I also think that is exactly why that middle space will go and try and do things like be fractional and work directly with clients themselves, because there's a lot of domain expertise there. And actually, if you can leverage that and sell your experience, which is super valuable to a lot of companies, then you can make a really good
Yeah,
career.
yeah, no, definitely. I think, I was reading an article the other day actually on the shapes of future firms. So, yeah, historically we've had that pyramid model, and we had the finders, the minders in the middle who like mind all the junior ones, and then the junior lawyers historically are the grinders, the one that grind out all the work and produce all the output essentially. But the article was also arguing how we could have maybe like a almost like a rectangle, and so we have more people, no less people, but at more levels, and everyone's like AI assisted. But then also they were arguing you could have like a dot, and a dot is that fractional GC who essentially is working by themselves and has, you know, AI assisted everything to work with them. And do you think that could be almost a risk for more firms and other legal teams that some of the top players of their game could be like, actually, if I become a fractional GC, I can maybe keep, more of my revenue than being a partner with such large overhead costs, primarily because you've got to train all these juniors. How do you see that like playing out?
More and more. And I can't speak to kind of the numbers that are leaving law firms to
Yeah.
start on their own from scratch, but I think it's an obvious transition. Not everybody makes partner. That's what the pyramid dictates that, right? So, but these are really smart people that can kind of add lots of value to businesses. So, yeah, alternative business structures will become more prevalent. We're seeing it with fractional lawyers, not necessarily coming straight from law firms, but just advising and working with different companies. So I think, yes, you could absolutely see a risk to law firms, but query whether risk is the right phrasing, because actually, like most law firms are kind of, I don't want to say up or out, but there is a pyramid in place, right? And not
Yeah.
everybody becomes a partner.
Yeah, and we're seeing it more and more in the legal market, the rise of, the salaried partner,
Yeah.
and firms not wanting to dilute the equity at the top. But there's so many other options now these days with the likes of Correm, people going to legal tech, people going in-house. Now, another thing I was thinking about when I was looking at Correm is, does the lawyer still need to really hone in and practice and be good at BD essentially, or does Correm just keep bringing them clients essentially, if that makes sense?
So, yeah, great question. Ideally, kind of in the long term, we reconfigure the way, businesses buy legal. And if we're successful at that, then the lawyers on Quorum will be able to kind of pick up work without doing too much BD. However, we encourage our lawyers to do BD, and in this phase of our business, it just brings more attention to us as a brand and as a platform. So
Yeah.
we work really hard behind the scenes to kind of put, BD material and stuff that they can use on their own personal LinkedIns to sort of grow their brand and grow their business. But yeah, long term, we're thinking actually, there's a couple of use cases. The first one is company doesn't have a lawyer at all, and they use Quorum or a Quorum lawyer as their fractional GC. The other use case is, data aggregates on Quorum pretty quickly, and it's really useful for companies. An example being, let's say, your business is doing, or your GC thinks your business or the legal function is super busy, they would typically approach a CFO and sort of say, we need extra headcount. What can we do about this? And the CFO, and this has happened to me multiple times, will, understandably ask kind of why quantify and let's see what the numbers say, if you like. Now, if you are operating with a fractional lawyer via Correm, you will see data that suggests here is exactly what they're working on. And here's the inflection point at which we need to bring in somebody else because we're now kind of like, I guess doing this much employment work in our business. Therefore, we need an employment specialist rather than going to firms. And if you use a Correm lawyer, you kind of get that data. So I guess if a business is Series A and they're using a Correm lawyer, and then at Series C, they go international and they think, right, we need somebody that's full-time. They'll have the data on exactly what sort of lawyer that needs to be and exactly what sort of skill set that lawyer needs to embody in order to hit the ground running. And that's what you get from using Correm.
I see. And so are all the emails essentially being sent through the Correm platform so you're able to see the contents of what's being worked on? Or is it just like the lawyer almost telling the platform what it is they're working on?
The lawyer's telling the platform what it is that they're doing. Yes, once kind of we configure and turn on the entirety of our AI tooling, it will become more intelligent, right? So they will be using it in the same way they use kind of like a foundation model now, right, within our environment. And that will produce data as well. But right now, the lawyers will be telling the platform what it is that they're doing. And as I mentioned earlier, there's an incentive for them to do that, because the more they do that, the more likely they are to get found and surfaced by companies coming to the platform.
Yeah, that makes sense. And almost be that first pick. Everyone wants to be that first pick for
Correct,
the company for the company that comes in for the work that they specialize in, right? Do you think like by 2030, high growth startups will actually employ any lawyers, or do you think everyone will be fractional? Or is there
I think there is space for every model of legal that as it operates today. It may just be reconfigured. So whereas you may have hired someone at Series A, it might be at Series C that you hire someone. And then before then, it's kind of like, a really good fractional lawyer that is managing a legal tech stack, and that's sufficient for you. Yeah, I think it might cause a little bit of a delay. I don't think if a company gets to the size of a Deliveroo or something like that, they're going to need a legal function in-house. And in that sense, they might sort of lean on Correm to kind of test growing their team. Almost like let's gather data that we need to buy before we actually buy someone permanent in-house, right? In the same way, kind of, they'd use like an Axiom or something like that now. But yeah, I think there is definitely space for every type of legal vertical as it exists today. It would just be reconfigured in terms of how much of each is used by companies and at what stage.
Today's episode is brought to you by Aline, AI-native legal operating software for in-house teams. Connect your drive and align red lines against your playbook. Turns every clause and obligation into a queryable repository and answers questions in plain English, like every MSA expiring in Q3. Teams at Superhuman, Sophos and Instacart save hundreds of hours every year using Aline. Start your free trial at aline.co, that's ALINE.co, and use code George for 25% off. Do you think there could be almost a risk, though, to Correm, whereas you might have a fractional lawyer and they love working with the client so much that they actually think, actually, I'm just going to go work in-house for this company?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a risk with any kind of platform that facilitates matchmaking. We want to make it, obviously as sticky as possible. And the numbers kind of speak for themselves. It's far more economic and lucrative for the lawyers if they're operating a portfolio of companies rather than working for one before it gets to kind of like, a really mature company and, you're there to take them to IPO or something like that. So there's economic incentives. And we also kind of give lawyers the opportunity to build that portfolio career that some are finding really attractive now. Myself, for instance, I've worked with biosciences companies, I've worked with property companies, I've worked with direct-to-consumer grocery companies. You don't get that experience if you work for one company. And a lot of lawyers want to take control of their practice and be more deliberate about it.
Yeah.
So two things, the economics and actually the kind of the way that you practice is a reason why they may not want to do that.
Yeah, no, the portfolio career that you touched on is really important. And I think, we see a lot more people. I think the stats now, the average tenure at a company is like 4 years before people are now, jumping to something different or even sidestepping that, they might not even want to be in legal anymore, go and work in business operations or development, for example. And yeah, I think we're not really seeing people, stay at the same company for 15, 20 years, or it's becoming more and more rare, at least, as people want to, I guess, try different things out. Yeah, cool. So I think, I'm a junior lawyer. I'm at the bottom of that barbell, if you like. A lot of the work can, but then also can't, I guess, be done with AI. But I think increasingly it'll be more and more capable to be able to do it. What are your tips for junior lawyers in this rapidly changing world? If you cast your mind back to Bird and Bird, and if you had to give yourself a tip, what would it? Yeah.
Well, I think, and I know a lot of people will say this, but I think there are some real opportunities. And like, to use a specific example, I remember sitting on client calls or in client meetings as a trainee where I did not have the commercial knowledge to contribute. And I certainly didn't have the legal knowledge at that stage at all.
Yeah.
Right. AI collapses the time it takes to learn a business, right? So even though you might not be able to kind of be the best legal voice in the team, you can really fully deep dive into a potential client business. And I think that's a bit of a superpower. What we were told when we were training is you need to have commercial awareness. Now there's no excuse, right? Like it's orders of magnitude easier to do that, right?
Yeah.
So I think a tip for junior lawyers would be to be better at kind of studying businesses because you can add value in different ways, right? And then I think be really deliberate about how you want your career to go. Nobody is denying that there's not a risk. There are people that are predicting that you just won't need juniors at all, right? But I haven't seen very many kind of solutions offered in terms of kind of how what we know as legal sustains. But what I do know is that as a junior, one of the things that I saw around myself when I was kind of a trainee is you qualify and you stay for, however many years, and then you push for partnership.
Yeah.
Or you go to another job and you stay for 5 or 6 years. I took a completely different approach. So I remember being told when I left Bird and Bird, are you sure that the company that you're going to is still going to be there? It's like a startup in a few years. And it's a real risk, right? But if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have gotten the experience to then do the next thing and then do the next thing and then do the next thing. So you got to be really deliberate about how you want your career to go and don't wait for opportunities for experience to come to you, would be my second tip.
So almost take those risks and work in those high growth environments, so then you have even more experience with the next place.
Yeah, I think kind of, I guess in a sentence, if the altruistic was work really hard and become a partner, AI might change that to work really hard, get as much experience so you could run your own practice. And if that's true, then it's on you as the junior lawyer to go and get as much experience as possible to do that.
Yeah. And yeah, I think almost be a bit more generalist than, well, have specialist knowledge, but no generalist that like almost commercial awareness, like you were saying.
Yeah.
I think it's also really important given, AI can only really see within that specific context window. Also just, I think, the human element is also really interesting as well and important because people buy off people, right? So
yeah, and I think people enjoy working with people. I don't think that's going to go anytime soon. It's just who that person has to be is rapidly changing.
And do you have any tips for fellow lawyers who might, or fellow general counsel that might want to start their own legal AI startup? What are some of the tips and challenges you faced on the way since starting?
Yeah, I think kind of if you want to start your own thing, some of the things about company building that, are well-trodden paths are true. Like go and buy in the experience that you don't have yourself. So go and work with a technical co-founder, be the domain expert. Like if you're building in legal, you are the expert, you are the kind of like knowledge holder, leverage that and go deep into what you've done in your career that has really worked for clients and try and productize that. I think now is the best time to build in this space. And I know the market kind of feels saturated with legal AI, but if you look at kind of the opportunities in terms of how much companies spend on services versus tech, and even using both of those, if there's going to be a shift in, tech spend, let's say that increases by 5%, that's still a huge, opportunity for builders in that space. And there's already a huge opportunity in terms of kind of like legal services, which is where we're more focused. So I think it's so early in the journey that it's a great time to build, and don't be deterred by thinking, okay, well, there's Harvey and Lagora in the market, and that's it.
Yeah.
There's no point. There definitely is a point.
No, interesting. And just quickly then, do you see Correm as a tech or as a service platform?
Well, I think it's kind of, I can't remember whether it was Sequoia or AZ16 that said it's kind of tech-enabled services that are likely to kind of dominate over the next few years. And before that rhetoric was out there, we were building Correm already. So to answer your question, we're providing services, or we're providing access to services in a way that is inextricably linked to tech, if you like. So one does not come without the other. And because of that tech, fractional lawyers can go quicker, support more clients, and provide prices that, appreciate a company's runway.
Yeah. Now, awesome. If people are listening to this and they've decided that they want to become an AI-enabled fractional GC, where can they find Correm?
Yeah, so just Correm.ai, reach out and you can kind of apply directly on the platform, or reach out to myself on LinkedIn. Yeah, we review every single application and we get back to everybody.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Kenzo.
Thank you.